Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands and welcome to an SP Reviews where today we have ourselves a track from an act named The Finite Beings titled Untamed. And if we switch it over to here we have ourselves a track on YouTube and we're going to be listening through the song from start to finish and we're going to hear what we think. It should also be noted that this is the official lyric video for the single Untamed by The Finite Beings off of their EP A Shell of What Could Be. So if you enjoy this song today, please do go check out the rest of their extended play. But let's get into it. Let's go. I was sassy with the distortion off the bat. Really tight with the mix, eh?
I'll try to explain how thoughts can be so misleading.
Great use of bluesy pentatonics there with the scale shapes.
The tongue is a fire where curses and blessings flow into the world we know. It goes untamed. Shouldn't be this way.
It sounds commercial grade. The band's tight, great chemistry between the musicians, not a note out of place. Sounds like they're just a really tight act who know what they're doing. And the vocals on the top are the icing of the cake. Great in string melodies there with some chromatics in there to add a bit of spice to it. String harmonies too.
Your ways are higher than my ways. Help me to understand. Your ways are higher than my ways. Some things are beyond understanding.
Oh, hella sick fill, man. Woo, bit of double kick.
Crafty little prick who whispers of sweet illusions into the ones we love. The enemy, a liar who preys on our weaknesses, keeping us from above. He goes unashamed, knowing he burns away.
When we talk about the idea of keeping us from above, is this discussing the concept of like ascending to a higher place like heaven or something like that? Is that the aim here? We're discussing someone or something preventing us from being able to get to where we want to be through subversion?
Your ways are higher than my ways. Help me to understand. Your ways are higher than my
Are those fourth harmonies? Because they're really bright,
Some
man.
things are beyond understanding.
Is that us trying to find salvation or something like that? Oh, nice little bit of radar.
Who am I to speak such things? Who am I don't mean to pry. Who am I as I fade to dust? Who am I? Guide me from inside.
I'm glad we have this lead section here. TheInfiniteBeings.com. No, that was tight. That was hella tight. They did great. Just making sure I don't miss anything at the end, because sometimes I do, and that's obviously not ideal. Good stuff, let's go to the conclusion. And welcome to the conclusion of my review of this track from an act named The Finite Beings, titled Untamed, off of their EP. What was the EP? Off of the EP titled A Shell of What Could Be, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. So, what is this track about to me? I think Untamed is looking at ourselves, trying to understand ourselves, why we are tempted maybe from being able to be above, wanting someone to like maybe guide us up to that higher plane there, come to terms with our own mortality and our own imperfections, that kind of thing. I think it's basically trying to gain a sense of introspection and a direction within that, if that makes sense at all. I think that these are topics that no matter how you feel or believe about these sorts of things, I think everyone can kind of benefit from looking at themselves and trying to understand what makes them tick and doesn't, where they're going in life, etc. So I think that at the very least, this will probably appeal to an audience based on that. The story is relevant to most, if not all, people's lives. And I think that these are questions that, again, regardless of how you feel about this kind of stuff or think, it's still good to question yourself and make sure, you understand what's going on within as well as around you. But I mean, in addition to that, I want to give a shout out to the vocals. I think that they're done well. The guy is a good singer, great sort of soft timbre to his voice there that is very welcome in amongst those guitars with the distortion there, the drums and the bass. Being in a mid to high range, you're stacked well on top of most of the elements within a genre like this, with the rock and metal stuff going on there. That mid to high range is a space for a singer who wants to have presence. So we're handling it really well. And it's not just the melodies we had the main melodies, we also had harmonies there, working with some fourths or something like that in regards to intervals there that were nice and bright and grandiose, and they're pretty. I think that we had really palatable melodies in here that were easy to sort of follow along to, and we repeated them because I think we were aware of the power of having a pathway that the listener can retread to a certain extent the second time round without making it exactly the same so that it's too similar and therefore the listener disengages. You need to have bits of change there to keep things kind of interesting, but it's about making it so, we're in the verse section, we're in the chorus, and it's about making that journey to that point as interesting and enjoyable as possible. And they did that. The vocal melodies and harmonies were well crafted. They resonated and amalgamated really well with the other elements within the arrangement. And I think that there was almost a sense of discovery around the questions that we were asking and what we were talking about. I liked the fact that we had a lyric video, by the way. Both of the reviews that I've done today had lyric videos. It's very helpful for reviewers like myself because sometimes, especially if it's like not our first language or something like that, having the words on the screen can be very helpful so that we can figure out what's going on. So I think that things were well connected with the vocals and the story made sense too with that. Outside of that, the song at 3 minutes 25 was well within that 2 to 4 minute sweet spot, which is great. And that's clever because it's what a lot of people expect from a single, and it makes it easier to digest and kind of sink your teeth into. We had verses and chorus sections there with little instrumental breaks as well. We didn't have the same thing for too long. We didn't have any filler, and it was great to have that lead part at the end with the harmonized guitars filling us out. That was fantastic. It was unexpected because we didn't really have any predominant lead parts beforehand. It was mostly vocal centered. So it was a great way to kind of spin a little bit of a tale about what else might be going on in future releases here, and to tease the listener into maybe, we're going to have not just vocals, but those pretty guitar harmonies and other tracks within the EP. I think that was clever because it leads on to the next track, I presume. Outside of the length of it and the fact that there were clear transitions between sections that made sense and were beneficial to the experience, it was also the fact that we had really interesting riffs on the guitars, the bass was tight, and the drums were ecstatic. I really enjoyed the drum grooves. Some of those fills, especially after the initial hook, were fantastic. I liked how tight the tone was on it. I liked the exploration of the toms there, that we had enough room to breathe there with a bit of double kick as well. We weren't feeling like we needed to pocket too much. That was great. The bass line was thick and full and had a sense of grit and determination to stick with it and keep that low end nice and full, which was fantastic. And the guitars with the power chord focus going and then intermingling with some of the lead elements there with the mid-range octave chords and then having the guitar harmonies at the end. There was a lot of variation there. We did like our chug chugs, but there were other parts there that were interesting to listen to, and ultimately I feel like there was a great balance between the rhythmic harmonic elements, and when there wasn't a lead vocal there, we came in with the higher range there and kind of filled that out nicely, which was cool. Make the most of the space you've got within a mix. It's really smart to do that. So that's cool. Ultimately, the combination of these different elements made me feel as though it was a track about wonderment and adventure and self-discovery. There was an aura, a feeling of almost self-immolation at the concept of not being able to find the answers we seek, but at the same time, there appeared to be a hope, especially with how thorough and regal those harmonies sounded on the strings at the end, that we would, at the end of the journey, find the solace that we seek. So it is an interesting way to end the track. I assumed there was a happy ending, but I cannot be sure. Well, I'd have to listen to the rest of the EP to find out. I mean, finally, we have the studio recording, mixing, mastering with that theme there kept in mind, and with a great instrumental performance coupled with a vocal line that makes sense with the story. You just need to nail how it sounds, how it was played, and how it was captured. And I think that the take itself with the vocals, the guitars, the bass, and drums was done well. There was a clear quality to the actual sound. It was nicely filtered and EQ'd with some really interesting, not only just effects change with the reverb part, some of the sort of processing of the vocals to get it to sound kind of sparkly, but also how they glowed in the harmonies there on the sides of the stereo field. That was wonderful. The guitars were nice and chonky without being too thick in the mids. The drums were punchy with short attacks on the compression there. They cut in without being too abrasive, and the bass nice and full without stammering the low end too much. There was a great sense of equilibrium throughout the individual components of the mix. With things nice and wide in the stereo field, and there being little to no resonant frequencies in the frequency spectrum, you really just had to enjoy the journey and appreciate the fact that there was dynamic range to this. Things were reasonably tight, but at the same time that can be expected of a loud track. You don't necessarily want to have massive shifts in loudness in this kind of music, because it can be a little bit too sort of disorienting, because you have these massive highs, and then if you go from that to low, it just, you want it to be heavy sometimes, you know what I mean? So I think it was heavy throughout. Even in some of the softer elements where we didn't have as much of the chugs, it still had force behind it. There was good balance there. And I think it was nice and loud, so the limiting bus compression was handled in the master chain. I mean, effectively, this is my review of the Finite Beings with their track Untamed, off of their A Shell of What Could Be EP. And hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please go show them some love via their various social medias and their YouTube page. And stay cool and stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as either help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world. And I will catch you in the next review. Spiderhands out.